Hey guys, it's Tracy. Welcome back to my channel. So today we are doing my January wrap up, which I am super excited to film because I think I actually had quite a good reading month as well as a great start to my reading year. I did read a total of 3 books this month, which probably doesn't sound that much, but for me it's quite a lot, especially with January being one of those busier months as well. I did read some amazing books and I am excited to talk about them. So the first book that I read for 2021, is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. It is a very well-known book amongst BookTube and BookTuner, and that's how I heard about it as well. It is a YA fantasy adaptation of Romeo and Juliet set in 1920s in Shanghai, revolving around these 2 rival gangs, Scarlets and the White Flowers, but more specifically the heirs to these gangs. So you have Juliet Kai and Roma Montagov, who used to be lovers. Because of their allegiance to their gangs, they are now at each other's throats constantly, but realize that they have to band together because there is something else that is threatening both of their gangs' livelihoods, and there is no way to take out this threat without joining forces. It is an exceptional read. I do have the physical copy, but I actually have lent it to a friend because of how much I was raving on about it. I can definitely understand the hype around it. I also think that Chloe should be very proud of what she has basically created. I am super excited to read the next installment of this as well because we were left on a massive cliffhanger. I think the one thing that I loved about this book was the research that Chloe put into the context or the setting of Shanghai. I didn't realize that there were so many other cultures and races that lived in Shanghai at the time. It wasn't just the Chinese, there were Russians, French, Americans, all of that. And the context or the history in it was so rich that I got to learn something besides just enjoying the story. It made the story so much more real. So I gave that one a 4.5 out of 5 stars, I'm fairly sure. I then read The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is also another fantasy novel written by an Asian author. I'm fairly sure it's adult fantasy as opposed to YA fantasy, and I think, or at least I would classify as that because of what's inside this book. I do think it is aimed towards more of an adult or older audience or mature readers, really. So The Poppy War is set in an empire called the Nikara Empire, if I've pronounced that correctly. It follows a girl named Rin, who is an orphan from a war that previously happened, and now she lives with a foster family who doesn't really appreciate her and basically treats her like a servant. She is determined to get out of this household, so she sits an examination test to get into a very prestigious academy for soldiers, and she ends up passing the exam and gets admitted to the academy. Now at the academy she realizes that she still doesn't belong because she does come from a much poorer region of the empire, and everyone else in this academy was born to basically be admitted to the academy. That was their purpose. They were trained, to fight, to learn all the techniques and the strategies and whatnot to eventually be admitted into this academy. So people kind of hold a grudge against her. She realizes that she doesn't belong, but as her training continues, they figure out that she actually has a magical power in her that could potentially make her a very powerful shaman. So you kind of follow her along this journey. I am in love with this book and this series, and I'm so angry at myself for not buying the 2nd and the 3rd book so I can just binge the entire series. And it's been a very long time since I've read a fantasy series where I've been captivated like this and I just keep wanting to read. Like, to me, this is quite a lengthy read because I'm not a huge fantasy reader, nor do I read books that are quite this big with this minuscule writing, but I pretty much flew through it. It did take me a few days. I don't know if I love the characters as much. I think that because they're all flawed, they are very relatable, but I don't know if I like any of them or like any of their aspects. I think that there is room for them to grow and to learn and maybe have a character arc development, which I'm excited to see, especially in Rin and her fellow companions. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, basically. I do want to write a review for The Poppy War, but I'm just very worried that I won't do it justice. And then the last book that I read in January is The Island by C.L. Taylor. This one I was kindly gifted by HarperCollins to write a review on, so thank you. It is a YA thriller where a group of teenagers meet each other once a year because their parents used to get together and hang out and go on holidays together. So they've passed that tradition on to their kids. So in this particular holiday that they actually go over to Thailand and off to a private island to celebrate one of the group members' birthdays. Now, when they get to the island, their tour guide has a heart attack and dies. And that's when the mystery starts. You don't know whether they're going to get off the island or not. And things just start to unravel, mostly centering around how everyone's phobias are starting to happen around them, because they all started to share their phobias on the first night there. It's an interesting read. I actually read this in about 2 hours, so in one sitting, because the pace was so intense and so quick. There was no way to stop reading. I just had to keep going, push through, because I really wanted to know what was happening on with these characters, you know, if anything bad was going to happen, were they going to get off the island. So that part to me was great. I loved the pacing of this story. I don't know if I loved the plot as much now that I think about it, because some parts I was kind of like, really questionable. Although I think the other thing that it does really well is address things like trauma, grief, bottling up emotions where it can become borderline dangerous, promoting better mental health awareness, which I think is a fascinating way of incorporating it into a thriller book. When reading this, you can get quite agitated. I read this right before bed, which probably wasn't a good idea because it did get kind of scary along the way. I do think if you are a thriller reader, it's well worth checking out, especially for the length of this. It's so easy to fly through. Like I said, I finished in about 2 hours or so, but I enjoyed the experience reading it. At the time, I was like, oh my God, I am overwhelmed. This was such a great read. But now that I'm looking back, I'm like, it was really a good read, but probably not the best thriller I've ever read. On initial thought, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, but it could be 3.5, 4 out of 5 stars. So that is the third book that I finished for the month. Currently, I am reading Holopox by Jessica Townsend, and I started this during January. It is a middle grade series, which is the Nevermore series, and it follows a girl named Morrigan Crow who finds out that she has magical powers, and she ends up being admitted into a magic school in this city or this society that no one knows exists, really. There are so many different characters and unique people in here who have different powers as well. They're all have their own traits, and you basically follow Morrigan along on this adventure with her. There are always so many secrets and surprises that are revealed during the way. I absolutely love this series. I think it's so worth checking out, and I'm hoping to finish this off sometime soon. Otherwise, those were the books that I read during January. Let me know what you read last month. What was your favorite book for the month? I would love to hear it. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a lovely day, and I shall see you soon.